Right, we're going holding by Pirkei Avos, Ethics for Fathers, as it's known. Again, we're going holding by Pirkei Avos, Ethics for Fathers. We are in chapter 2, Mishnah 16, and I think this is part 34. There'll be a part 35. This is part 35. There'll be a part 36, 37, 38. I'm sure. Again, we're going holding by Pirkei Avos, chapter 2, Ethics for Fathers, Mishnah 16, and the Mishnah says, in the name of Rabbi Yeshua. For the Mishnah says that an evil eye, evil inclination, hatred of other people remove a person from this world. So that's pretty much what we've been speaking about for all these classes, basically. But the evil eye, how it works, jealousy, in general, that's what it is. Why a person may be jealous. Rabbeinu Yonah says, again, a person's not happy with what they have. They see what, their friend is wealthier than them. Their friend has, let's say, better spouse, better kids, better, they have more money. They have all these things. So an expert in nature would say a person desires all that their friend has, contaminates a person's thoughts, and it burns inside of them. They're basically jealous of what they have and destroys the person's body. Again, it's going to make them depressed. Why? Because they're always going to think about it. And in the end, it will take them out of this world. And it also shows that a person will have negative thoughts towards these people, right? They'll definitely have negative thoughts. And the negative thoughts, again, never good just to keep thinking negative, negative, negative. Certainly anyone will tell you that, right? To be negative, never seeing the good in anything is bad, right? In general. And, we've spoken many times about trying to see the good. Even if things look bad, right? Even if things look bad doesn't mean it's going to be totally bad. It could turn out good. Even if things look good doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be good. It could also be bad. So another aspect, just look at it from, I don't know if it's a different angle, but maybe a little bit differently. And we mentioned a few weeks back, we spoke about this idea that one of the Ten Commandments is not to covet. So maybe it comes under this category, right? In other words, the person's jealous of what someone has now, and they desire what they have. So desire could come under this category of coveting, and coveting could also mean that even let's say you buy something legally. You convince someone to sell it, but they didn't really want to sell, but you bother them, to no end in order to sell it, and they end up selling it to you. It's a good deal. 100% it's a good deal, but you may be over a total prohibition of coveting. Coveting doesn't necessarily mean just in my mind, right, per se. It doesn't necessarily mean that. It can mean also doing something, right? Doing something where you end up taking something from someone else legally, right? Hang them over a cliff. You get them to sign away something. It's still a good deal, right? We spoke about that. I want to hit a little bit different aspect over here. And this is something that can happen to anybody, right? For whatever reason, we said before that the lack of faith and belief in God, that basically what you have coming to you, you'll think this is mine, or it should be mine, or whatever the case is, and that, it should be coming to me. And why is it going to them? Why should they have more than me? And they'll look at life in general and say, well, it's not fair. I don't deserve this. I work hard. I've changed my life. This shouldn't happen. Okay. Right? But a little bit, going to look at it a little bit differently. And that is, let's say this is the way of the world. Now we're going to get very depressing here. If it's the way of the world, this is what people do. Now, we don't necessarily care what people do. It doesn't necessarily, have an effect on our lives. Sometimes it does, right? Sometimes what people do can certainly have an effect. But let's say this is the way of the world. And this is what people do. And this is very common. Now, if it's very common, can God punish a person for doing something that everyone else does? Right? So the Gemara says, interesting, by the laws of ribbis, laws of lending. A Jew is not allowed to lend another Jew money with interest. It can certainly loan a non-Jew with interest, but a Jew, the Torah says, you're not allowed to lend money with interest. Okay. Now, even though you're not allowed to lend money with interest, the way the world would be, if I own somebody 100 or 1,000, right, let's say, why should I lose out? In other words, if I lend $1,000 to someone, let's say that, and I say, okay, I'm going to lend you 1,000, but I want 1,200 back. I want 1,400 back. Yeah, why should I lose out? I'm doing a big mitzvah. I'm helping you. I'm lending you my money. That money for me is not working. I'm not using it, not making more money from it. So, therefore, what happens? Why should I lose? Why in the world should I lose? So the Gemara says, very interesting. The Gemara says, we're trying to look for reasons why we do these things. The Gemara gives some answers, doesn't give all the answers. The Gemara says it's a common thing. In other words, a person goes to a bank, they're going to charge you interest. You go to other people, they'll charge you interest. That's the way of the world, right? That is the way of the world. So the question is, so the Gemara says, that's the way of the world. Why is it forbidden? Why should it be forbidden? Everybody does it. It's a common thing, right? Comes along the Torah and says, no. Torah says I'm not allowed to do it. Yeah, I'm not allowed to. These are the most probably some of the most complex laws, that exists, and very common, not just in loans and other things. Let's say, a company is owned by Jews. Yeah, and they sell, I don't know, whatever, they sell appliances. So you want to buy a washing machine, very good. So they say if you pay up front, it'll be $500. If you pay in installments, it'll cost $650. That's ribbis. That's forbidden. If it's a non-Jew, it doesn't matter, right? We're not talking about a non-Jew here. We're talking about between Jews. Jews are not allowed to lend money with Jews. This is lending. It's like you're paying more in installments, but you're paying more for what it is, right? In other words, the fact that you can extend the installments, which will make it easier on you to pay it, very good. The only problem is that's interest, right? Now it'd be forbidden. It comes up a lot. Here it comes up a lot. In Israel, a person doesn't pay a bill all the time. What do? They'll charge you interest. Now you can say they're not allowed to, right? Jews are not allowed to charge other Jews interest. Okay, but that's what they do, right? We're not living according to Torah over here. So many, rabbinic authorities would say, whatever bill you have, you make sure you pay it on time, so you don't have that problem. But not always so easy. People, get behind, they get stuck, whatever. So this certainly can come up. But anyway, what's the point? The point is, the Gemara says this is the way of the world. Since this is the way of the world, regardless, even if this is what the majority of people do, it doesn't matter. Why doesn't it matter? Because the Torah says it's forbidden. 100% the Torah says it's forbidden. So now, when I look at this, and a person will say, they see what someone else is doing, and they feel it in their heart. They feel, why can't I do this, whatever? You'll say it's the way of the world. It's common. Isn't this a common thing? We mentioned many times, we shouldn't care what other people are doing. They're going on many vacations, they got fancy cars, they do other things. So what? What does that have to do with me? Yeah, certainly in the States, probably other places also it's much worse, because the ones that have and the ones that don't, there's a big gap. There's a very, very big gap. Yeah, here in Israel, it's a lot easier. Everyone's in the same boat. Some better, some worse, right? But everyone's more or less in the same boat. And you do have people, if they're in high tech, let's say, they're making serious money, making good money. Other people struggle. right? They have to marry off kids is a whole other thing, right? But everyone is more or less in the same boat. But in other places, there's a huge difference. It's a big, big difference between those that have and don't. You just see how they live their lives. Okay. Now, if you tell me it's the way of the world, and this is what people do, and this is how people size up other people. I'm not saying it's right, but that's what people do. Can God expect something from you if everyone else does it? Yeah, interesting theoretical question. In other words, we would say that if everybody has this character trait, some give into it more, let's say, some give into it less, whatever it is, but everybody feels it. Everybody feels it at some level. Can God expect a person to overcome that? In other words, is God going to put a person in a position that they're bound to fail? Meaning, like, they'll never be able to overcome this. Now, that wouldn't be fair. That wouldn't be fair, because if it's a question of how much a person's going to fall, then why is God going to punish someone? He knows they're going to fall. The only question is how far. So if that's the case, in all these cases, what would I say? I say it's not fair. Everybody's in the same boat. So if you look at the Chuvas of Office, duties are hard. So he says in a number of places, and things that are difficult to do, he says like this: you think I'm only talking to the righteous, right? This only applies to righteous people. So comes the Chuvas of Office and he says, no, this applies to everyone. Might not be easy, but applies to everyone, right? I'll give an example. Torah Book of Leviticus chapter 19. I'll get there one day. Don't exactly know when, but I'll get there. The Torah over there says, among other things, it says you're not allowed to bear a grudge against someone, right? Meaning a Jew against a Jew. You're not allowed, probably be a good thing for a non-Jew also, not to bear a grudge. Maybe it's not part of the Noahide laws, but I'd say it's probably that's a moral imperative. And the Torah says don't take revenge. Now, what's the idea of taking revenge? You need a lawnmower, right? Backyard, like a jungle. You ask someone to borrow a lawnmower, and he says no. For whatever reason, says no. You go out and get a lawnmower. This person comes back a few weeks later, a month later, whatever it is, doesn't matter. And he says, can I borrow your lawnmower? Now, all things being equal, if this person is normally responsible and will return it in the right way, and and this and that, very good, you have no reason to reject it. You have no reason not to lend it, unless you need it. Right? Now, let's say you don't need it, or no one else is using it. Now, if you tell them, I'm not going to give you my lawnmower because you refuse to give me yours, that's a Torah prohibition. Now, you got an axe to grind over here, no pun intended. You're angry. You needed your lawnmower. Let's say better. You needed a lawnmower. Your house was, your backyard was like a jungle, looked bad. You wanted to take care of it. This guy wouldn't lend it to you. Again, for no good, we'll make it easy. No good reason. If he thought, let's say, you might ruin it, you won't return it right in the same way, okay. Then who says I have to lend it to them? Unless you'll take the chance, right? You'll take the chance. If the person is negligent, who says I have to lend it to them? It's probably going to come back ruined or, damaged. So that's okay. I don't have to lend it to them. Right? If I want to, I could, knowing that's probably not going to come back the same as the way you gave it. Very good. So then, okay, that's a different issue. But if this person says, I'm not going to give it to you because you didn't give it to me, now that's taking revenge. Now you ask me the $1 million question. The $1 million question is, does he have a right to say that? He can be angry. Okay, angry, a bad character trait. Okay. But you really needed it. whatever reason, whatever it is you wanted to borrow. You really needed it, and the person said no. Caused you aggravation. You had to find another one. You had to wait. Whatever caused you aggravation. Okay. And again, for argument's sake, this person had no right to say what he said. Had no reason. He had no reason not to help you. Okay. So you're angry. You're aggravated. You could have used it. He could have helped you. Right. And didn't want to. He felt he didn't have to. He didn't have an obligation to help you. Let's say. So now let's say he could have and he didn't. So now you're going to say, okay, you did that, so I'm going to do this. Right? Tit for tat, as we would say. Now, what's the problem? It's a total prohibition. Is someone going to say they're aggravated? Sure. Are they going to say they really needed this help, whatever it was? Yes. And the person didn't come through, right? And now they need your help for, let's say, the same thing. And you're nowhere to be found. You're not going to help them, but you're going to tell them off. And you're going to tell them why you're not going to help them. Right? It's kind of worse in a certain way. Right? But you're going to tell them you're not going to help them. You know why you're not going to help them? Because they refuse to help you. And let's say they have no excuse. They're not coming back and saying, well, I really should have, but I had this factor involved. Let's say no. There was no reason why they didn't want to lend it. They were late. They didn't want to. They didn't want to for whatever reason. Now, wouldn't a person say, looking at it from the outside, wouldn't a person say, isn't this the way of the world? Isn't this what happens? Some would say, like, what are you getting so upset about? Don't let this person in your head. Okay, so they don't lend it to you. So move on. When you see people talk. See, that's the problem. People talk. And they'll say, oh, it's really, really bad what this person did. You could have really used the help. And they didn't want to help you. And then they trash the person. Right? Which a lot of times happens. Which again, you're over many, many prohibitions speaking badly against others. I.e. Lashon Hara. Okay. So that just festers. Gets the person more angry, more aggravated. Okay. Instead, so what's the person should have done? They should have looked at the bigger picture. Okay, this person is not the messenger to help me. I'll find someone else. Right? Plenty of people out there. I'll find someone else to help me. They're not going to get aggravated, not going to get down. They're just going to say, this is the person who's not going to help me. Okay. But if they come back to you, and you have no good reason not to help them back, then you transgress the Torah prohibition. You will transgress the Torah prohibition. Because over here, two wrongs do not make a right. Right? He didn't lend you for whatever reason. Again, doesn't matter why. Right? I mean, if the person felt you're going to damage it, fine. He's got a legitimate excuse. But what if he doesn't have a legitimate excuse? So now, he says, I'm not going to lend it to you. Then he comes back to you, and you say, well, I'm not going to lend it to you because you didn't lend it to me. I got childish in a certain way. But okay. Yeah. You did this, I'm going to do that. All right, you didn't accomplish anything. Right? You transgressed the Torah prohibition. Now, what's the $1 million question? The $1 million question is, how's this look in God's eyes? Does God expect the person to live at that level? In other words, if a person can't live to that level, God can't punish you. In other words, He can't put you in a position to fail. Because obviously, if we're in certain positions, whatever it may be, God knows we have the opportunity to overcome it. Right? If a person's in a position where it's absolutely impossible, there's no possible way they'll be able to overcome it, then God can't punish you. We only have one instance in Torah that it's like that. And that is by Pharaoh. Why? Because God hardened Pharaoh's hearts. Right? God made a mockery of Pharaoh, and He punished him severely. Obvious question. If He hardened his heart, he's got no free will. Again, man's the only being in the world that has free will. Animals, programmed DNA. Right? Even if they choose to eat or not to eat or whatever. They're programmed. They do things by instinct. They have one aspect of the soul. i.e. the animalistic aspect of the soul. Plants, trees, right? The wind, stars, the moon, they can't go out of their nature. They can't fight against their nature. It's their nature. That's it. They only do certain things. And if God wills it, they'll do other things. If not, they can't. Right? So we have the ability, mankind is the only one that has the ability to make choices. Right? God put the spirit of life into us. And the Aramaic translation of that verse in Genesis is a ruch mema'ala, the ability to speak. Doesn't necessarily mean to speak. All animals speak also. If I were Dr. Doodle, I would speak with the animals. There were rabbis at the time of the Talmud that knew let's say, the language of the birds, but probably most people not today, right? But what does it mean, the ability to speak? It means to reason. It means to make decisions. So we can make good decisions. We can make bad decisions, right? Depending on the circumstance. So if God understands our nature and the source of our soul and what we're capable of, so we have the ability to overcome. Very good. But if he takes away free will, if he takes away our free will, as in the case of Pharaoh, which the Torah says explicitly, then the obvious question is, how can he punish him? He takes away anybody's free will. Yeah, so the Rambam, Maimonides discusses it, Rav Saadia Gaon discusses it, others discuss it, right? So some say he still had free will. It didn't take away fully, right? But it's something like it's going to be like impossible to change. Yeah, it's going to be impossible to overcome it, right? I'll give an example. You take somebody, I had this question for many years. You take a reformer conservative Jew, they come to synagogue on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Yeah, now you tell me, or we'll ask the question, what are they doing there? What are they doing there in Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur? You tell me, what do you mean? They're there to pray. Do they have a connection for God, with God? Okay. Let's see what the service looks like, what's going on. People hammer me and say, you don't know it's in a person's heart? Okay. So maybe they're coming to synagogue because that's what their soul tells them to do. Maybe it's guilt. I don't know. Whatever, they're coming for a few hours. Whatever it may be. So my question is, most of these people don't keep Shabbos properly. They don't keep most mitzvahs properly. If any. Yeah, and they desecrate all kinds of things. So what does God give them? See, Rosh Hashanah, you ask a reformer conservative Jew, what does Rosh Hashanah mean? What will they tell you? They'll tell you it's the new year. Very good. Yeah, it is we look at it as the new year. Very good. Anything else to tell us? You look at the liturgy, you look at a machzor, you look at a prayer book on Rosh Hashanah. What's the main theme? Right, you gotta be blind not to see it. The main theme is judgment. Right? It's all about judgment. The world gets judged. Non-Jews get judged. Jews get judged. It's all about judgment. Yeah, Yom Kippur is all about what? Atonement. Right? It's all about, atonement for sin. Now, the Gemara says clear, right? Asks the question, what if you don't believe in the power of atonement, of Yom Kippur? You're there for whatever reason, but you don't really believe that I'm getting atonement or anything else. Does atonement work in such a case? Gemara says, no. In other words, if you don't believe in it, why should it help automatically? Why should God give you credit for atonement if you don't really believe in it? Yeah, so I had a question. For many years. My question was, people like that show up to synagogue, what does God give them? Now, let's say for argument's sake, I'm right. Yeah, they're there to pray a little bit, maybe. They don't have a clue. They don't have a clue what's going on. Yeah, even though people say you don't know what's in their heart. Okay. Even if I don't know what's in their heart, what is God giving them? Yeah, what is he giving them? In other words, Rosh Hashanah, you're begging for life. It's all about life and death. Who by fire, who by water, who by this, who by that. We know there are people no longer in this world from year to year. So it's all about judgments. Then you have 10 days of repentance. Then you have Yom Kippur. And Yom Kippur should atone if there's, and if there's a bad degree, if a person repented properly, the bad degree gets uprooted. Very good. Or you have until the second to last day before Sukkot, i.e. Hoshana Rabbah. Some say until Hanukkah. But let's say until Yom Kippur. If you don't properly repent, what happens? You don't get the atonement. right? Or let's say better, the decree that was made will not get annulled, right? Let's say. Okay. Now, if you don't really believe in all this, yeah, if you don't really believe in this, then it doesn't work, right? And that makes sense. Because why should God grant someone atonement just because they showed up in synagogue? That's a big thing, not a small thing. They showed up to synagogue. Okay, they showed up to synagogue, but the essence of what they do is that they don't really believe in the whole thing. But they show up to synagogue. Maybe it's a social thing. Maybe they feel guilty. I don't know. Whatever it is. So my question was for many years, what does God give them? You know, let's say they're not really there to pray. They're not really to have a connection. They're there for other reasons. Right? One person once told me to go to synagogue on the high holy days, you have to have a ticket to get in. And, the more money you pay, the closer you get to the AC, to the air conditioners. I said, great. I said, so why don't you take a portable one and bow down to it? They're like, you're very cynical. I said, you're right, I'm very cynical. But you just told me the more money you pay, the closer you get to the AC. So you're really not there to pray to God, obviously. You're there for the AC. So why don't you just get a portable one? They're like, I don't know, I think it was so funny, right? But if that's the case, let's say, you'll say that's one person. Okay. So bottom line is this question bothered me. Bothered me for a long time. So I heard Reb Berkowitz Shlita should be well, head of the Yeshiva Eish Torah in Jerusalem. And he asked the question at one of his classes on, must have been about Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur or whatever. And he asked the question. I said, oh, beautiful. Beautiful. He asked the same question. Yeah. So what did he say? So the answer was that God gives them, more of what they're already doing. Maybe gives them more money. Maybe gives them more fame. Maybe, I don't know, whatever he gives them. He gives them more of what they're doing right now. Now, what's the obvious question? The obvious question on that is if God gives them more of it, in other words, their soul is pretty much demolished. There's almost nothing left of their soul, let's say, spiritually. So God gives them, a lot more physicality, other things. Okay. But there's an obvious question. If God gives them more of it, right? And this is really the point here. If he gives them more of it, how can they repent? How can they come out of it? It's as if they don't have free will. It's as if their free will is taken away. In other words, if God's going to, person's wealthy and has success, whatever, what does God give them next year? More of it. Not knocking them out, he gives them more of it. Okay. So the more money a person has, the more power a person has, and it keeps growing exponentially year in and year out, is that person going to change? Probably not. Right? Most likely not. Not going to change for nothing. Why? Because they're given everything. So if that's the case, they're given more and more and more of the same thing, how is that going to get them to change? So you tell me it's impossible. Okay, not necessarily impossible. Not 100%. Right? They still have enough free will that if they want to, they could change. Now, does that mean it's going to be easy? Oh, no. Not going to be easy. But at the same time, not going to be impossible. Totally impossible. Right? It's one possible explanation. Another possible explanation is God wanted to make Pharaoh an example. He gave him an opportunity to repent. And when he said, who's this God I should listen to? After that, he still gave him an opportunity. After, I think, the first two plagues, commentaries say. After that, he took it away to make an example. So you're right. Person will say, God cannot punish someone if they don't have free choice. If he takes it away. Okay, in this case, it's different. Why is this case different? Very simple. Because God wanted to make an example of him. God wanted to wipe the floor with him and show the world. And show the world how foolish you are. And, and his whole country is going to get decimated. And he's going to have to watch the whole thing. So God used him as an example. Okay. But in general, that's the question. If a person's free will is really taken away, then really God shouldn't be allowed to punish them. Now, Rebbe says many times, he's mentioned many times, that, let's say we're involved in things we shouldn't be, see things we shouldn't, we hear things we shouldn't, let's say. So he says, how do you know your free will hasn't been taken away? I can say, what do you mean? I can do what I want. I have free choice to do whatever I want. That's true. Person 100% has free choice. But when you look at certain things, right? When you look at certain things, what's the question? We're stuck. There are certain things we do over and over and over again because we are creatures of habit. But there are things, once you start doing things, it becomes part of your psyche, which I mentioned many times, becomes part of your DNA. Once it's part of your DNA, it's very hard to change. I'm not going to say impossible, but it's very hard to change. Very, very hard to change. Now, that being said, is it impossible? No, right? It's not impossible. The problem is that it's going to be very, very hard. So the Gemara says again, if you want to go in the right direction, God will help you. If you want to go in the wrong direction, he will not stop you. So my Rebbe would say, if a person is steeped in desire, right? We've spoken about a lot in the book of Leviticus. If a person is steeped in desire, then you need the brain, the intellect, to overcome that desire. So he says, the Or Chaim HaKadosh, of blessed memory, 100 years ago, says in Leviticus chapter 18, verse 2, that's where we're holding in that class. We're still probably going to be there tomorrow and maybe the next few weeks. Nonetheless, he says that that there's a difference between a righteous person and an evil person, right? A righteous person is in control of desires. They have their heart in their hand, meaning they're in control. Doesn't mean they don't have an evil inclination, but essentially they're the ones in control, right? They're not being controlled by base desires. They are not being controlled by their heart, what their heart tells them to do. Very good. So an evil person, they are controlled by the heart. The intellect over here goes out the window, the intellect being the soul. Spirituality, that goes out the window. The heart is in control. And what happens when the heart is in control? Then they'll do whatever the heart tells them. Now, let's say what the heart tells them to do is negative activity, and things maybe against the law, other things. Okay, so that might be a deterrent. But the heart over here is in control. A person will say, I have free choice to do what I want, this and that, right? I'm my own person, I'm not swayed by what other people do, but it's not true. Totally not true. Yeah, people are swayed by the media, people are swayed by social media, by family, by friends, they can be their own individual. Okay. Question is, what do? Do they go against the grain? They do, like everyone else? And most people, are going to be on one side or the other. Yeah. There's no way of being, and let's say a person's radically different than everyone else. Let's say radically different. Okay. Yeah, anti-establishment. Very good. Yeah, but what's that going to get them? You have to be very strong, to be unique. So people get swayed. People get swayed by the media, very easily. And, there is no fact checking. They think what they heard is being fact checked, but, plenty of lies out there that sell, and will continue to sell because that's what people want to hear. They're not willing to look into, they're not willing to look in any information. You see, quote unquote pro-Palestinian, quote unquote, are getting into politics. You see, it's a very, very powerful movement. College campuses, other places. I mean, it's a huge thing. What's going on, unfortunately. But if you would ask most people, they have no idea. They have no clue. Off from the river to the sea. They don't know which river, right, or which sea. They don't have a clue. But they don't know anything about history. They're not looking into history, and they don't care. Seemingly, they don't care. They're just listen to all the lies everyone else is saying, right? And they'll say, "Oh, it makes sense. They're committing genocide and this and that." Okay, but if we were doing that, we're doing a bad job. Certainly since 1948, the Arabs have grown exponentially. We're hundreds of thousands, millions of people. If we were really committing genocide, we're doing a very bad job. We should have wiped them all out, but that's obviously not the case. Yeah. I mean, you look at basic things, and they're out to lunch, totally out to lunch. But yeah, we always say, don't confuse me with the facts. Don't confuse me with the facts on the ground. Do you really know what the facts on the ground are? Or are you looking at the facts on the ground? No. Well, people caught up in this thing, saying the same thing over and over again, in different ways. In different ways, it comes out to the same thing, essentially, but they don't have a clue. Not like they ever studied it. They never looked at both sides. They don't, they haven't looked at the history. I mean, again, just give one example because I don't want to get into politics, right? You look at Mark Twain, Samuel Langhorne Clemens, as he was known, wrote Huckleberry Finn, Tom Sawyer. He came to Israel in what time? The late 1800s. And he wasn't a religious person, by the way. When he came to Israel in the late 1800s, he said exactly the same thing the prophet said. He came to Israel, the whole place was flattened like a pancake. Absolutely flattened like a pancake. There's like hardly anybody there. He had difficulty finding people in different places. There was no one around. So if they really had their own people in their own place, where were they? There's nobody there. Right? Jews were non-Jews, there's nobody there. Right? Essentially what the prophets say. Right? The whole place is gonna be, just washed out until the Jews come back. And that's what happened. But if they were really an entity, and if they were really a people, where were they? Imagine when the Ottomans took over. Big Ottoman Empire in the 1800s. Very good. So where were they? When the British took over in the 1900s, where were they? Were they complaining, jumping up and down, screaming, they stole our land? Where were they? They weren't anywhere. They're part of Jordan, part of Lebanon, part of Egypt, all these places. They have their own thing. They're nothing. They're zero. Yeah. Oh, don't confuse me with the facts. Those are the facts. Again, those are the facts on the ground. So either, but what's happening? People are being sold this story, and this lie, and lies perpetuate. Right? No one checks it out. That's that's the way it is. They saw it in the newspaper, they saw it on the internet, so it must be true. We don't have a clue. I have no clue whatsoever. Right? So, maybe it's a trendy thing, maybe, whatever, but how many people really see the facts? They're not interested in seeing the facts. Okay. Now, the point is that, a person can be swayed by the media, even Jews. They got plenty of secular Jews out there advocating for the rights of these people. Now, some might have changed a little bit after October 7th, right? But some will go so far to say, okay, we understand what they did because of what the Jewish people did against them, what the Israelis did against them. I mean, I don't think so many people are going to be that naive anymore, exactly who they're dealing with. But some people could come back and say, well, if you didn't oppress them so much, and all this, then that wouldn't have happened. There are some people like that. You will have people like that. But when they talk about, quote unquote, a two-state solution, who are you talking to? Right? Who's going to be the other side? The ones that want to kill you? They're not, you think Hamas is any different than the Palestinian Authority? They're the same. Palestinian Authority in their charter does not recognize the right of Israel to exist. So a two-state solution for them doesn't exist. It's only a one-state solution. For them, not for Jews. In other words, they want to annihilate all the Jews, throw the Jews all out, or annihilate them either way, right? And have their own place. That's what they want. So we argue with. They're not interested. Very good. Now, so what's the point? Without getting into politics, what's the point? The point is that it's very easy to get what do you call it? Not to be swayed by the media. Now, that being said, don't we have free choice? Everyone's got free choice. If you want to go in the right direction, God will help you. Right? The obvious case, the Torah says, well, on this topic, the Torah says that God says let us see what's going on in Sodom. So what's the we? What's the English we over here? So the we over here is God's using his humility and talking to the heavenly court because doesn't want to destroy Sodom without bringing the heavenly court down. Does God need the heavenly court? No. Does God need to show them? No. Does God just destroy Sodom because he wants to? Yeah. But he did it out of humility. Now, there's an obvious question. It says, let us. Now, let us see what's going on. Now, couldn't that be that, forget about God talking to the heavenly courts, Rashi and others say, okay, couldn't it be that, it looks like there's more than one God? Sure. Could a person make that mistake? Absolutely. Does God want you to make that mistake? No. But you could make that mistake. Okay. Now, we're not robots. Person wants to make that wrong choice. They can make the wrong choice. There are 80,000 different religions in the world. They've all made the wrong choice, right? Obviously, except for us. But, it's funny. I was thinking earlier today, you look at the Christians and all their quote unquote proofs, all their proofs in Tanakh, in the Torah where it's referenced to JC. Yeah, where they claim, it's referenced to him in Isaiah 53 and Daniel chapter 9 and right, all these other things that they say. Okay. Right? So I had a very simple question. Very simple question. And that is, why don't the verses and the prophets and the writings say explicitly? Why not tell me explicitly this is what it's referring to? Right? So our commentators will tell you, yeah, it's representing this, it's representing that, whatever, because a lot of different things going on behind the scenes. Okay. But either they're going to say, well, it's a hint to this. And it's a hint to him and this and that. So tell me explicitly. The Torah makes very clear. God spoke to Moshe saying, right? Speak to the Jewish people. Speak to Aaron, and the Jewish people. Or he spoke to Aaron and God and Moses at the same time. And he said, give over to the Jewish people. That's very clear. Very, very clear. Now you want to tell me, oh, I got these convoluted passages that are going to say, no, we're not chosen anymore. And we're going to give you Webster's 8th definition. Well, tell me explicitly. Right? Someone came back, maybe I'll speak about this in my Q&A. Someone said, there's that when the Messiah comes, he's going to come on a donkey. Yeah? Now, there's a contradiction. One place says it's going to come from heaven, come from like the clouds, so to speak. Another place it says it's going to come on a donkey. Very good. Right? There's a discrepancy. Okay. So a person comes back and says, well, JC already came. And he came on a donkey. Very good. Yeah, so forget whether we hold of those sources or not. Well, let me ask the $1 million question. I mean, are we supposed to take that literally? Are we supposed to take it's going to come on a donkey literally or not? I got a contradiction. Total contradiction. Either it's going to come from heaven or it's going to come that way. But everybody says, all the commentaries say, whether you hold by rabbinic law, rabbinic literature or the commentaries or whatever, or not, which some people say we'll never hold them. Okay. Majority hold, if not all of them hold, this is a metaphor. It's a metaphor. Meaning, what does the character trait of a donkey have to do with the coming of the Messiah? Yeah? What does it mean? It means it's literally coming on a donkey? Maybe. I'm not going to throw that possibility out. Maybe. He's going to come on a donkey, show kingship, whatever. Whatever that represents. Yeah? But what does it mean? Yeah, some things we do take literally. Okay. We do take literally, right? One thing I'll give an example. That there's a passage that says that the temple's going to come down from heaven. Okay. Even though the temple's going to come down from heaven, one of the things the Messiah has to do is to bring in the ingathered and the exiles. JC certainly never did that. And build the temple, which he never did either. Right? That's something the Messiah has to do. Now, what do you do with that passage? It's going to come from heaven. If it's going to come from heaven and it's going to come crashing down, very good. So what do you do with the Messiah? He's supposed to build it. Some say, okay, the things are going to have to be fixed up, whatever, and he'll do the rest. Okay, maybe. These contradictions all over the place. All over the place. So like, it's ironic, they'll take the hardest passage and say, oh no, it's a hint to this, a hint to that. But you got to ask the question, okay, Jason came riding on a donkey, very good. Yeah, they already came to fulfill it, but obviously we don't believe he fulfilled anything. Fine. But what does a donkey represent? Why is it coming on a donkey? Yeah. They want to tell me, okay, that's what the passage says. Okay. we'll be Karaites for a second. Very good. So, according to that, literally he's going to come on a donkey. Okay. What do you do with the other passage? Totally contradicts it. Says he's not going to come from a donkey. He's not going to ride on a donkey. He's going to come out of heaven. He's going to come down from heaven. I got a contradiction. Major contradiction. Right? Forget about the commentaries. A major contradiction. Black on white. Black on white. So what do you do? What do you say? How are we going to answer it up? Yeah. The question's going to be, what does either one of them mean? What does it mean he's coming down from heaven? He's a human. Yeah. Well, so he's going to all of a sudden fly out of the sky? Sounds like one of these Marvel movies or whatever. Right? He's going to fly out of the sky? What does that mean? You're going to ask the question. But if I have a direct contradiction, then he's coming on like, wow, JC fulfilled that. Very good. He fulfilled it. He came on a donkey. Okay. Is that really what's going to happen? If I have contradictions, I don't know what's going to happen exactly. Got contradictions. Not from the rabbis. How it's going to happen? In Tanakh itself, for the prophets and the writings. Very good. Yeah. So all the commentaries go into great detail what a donkey represents. Right? A lot of these things in Tanakh in general that are talked about, who's it talking about and what's going on. Right? The language is used as a metaphor. Not to be taken literally. Some things aren't taken literally. Okay. So you have to know where, when, and how, and all that. So if you don't believe in rabbinic interpretations, well, fine, you kind of be kind of stuck here. Yeah, but again, you got to be able to know how to look at information. Good. Now, can't someone make a mistake? People want to believe in this. And they'll bring all their proofs. They'll bring all the proofs why that verse in Isaiah is not talking, about a virgin. Why it is talking about a virgin. And they'll show biblical proofs for it. Okay. If you want to make a mistake, God's not going to stop you. If you want the truth, God will help you. Yeah? But again, it's an obvious question. It's an obvious question. Every last one of these things is all about Webster's 8th definition. It's nothing direct. It's nothing black on white. They'll say, of course, this is obvious. This is what it means. Seriously? If you look at it at face value, right? Let's give one example. I'm on this topic. Where do you know the Trinity from? In our sources. In the Torah itself. No, Dr. Michael Brown, he says, Abraham after circumcision is talking to God, right? And 3 Arabs come. Now, we understand they're angels. So it brings down Rashi. Very good. They're angels. Angels disguised as Arabs. Good. So what do I have? One's coming to tell Sarah's going to have a child. One overthrows the dome. One to heal Abraham. Very good. Now, what's the big proof here? Right? So he says God's talking to God. God is talking to Abraham. Yeah? He's talking to Abraham. Now, if Abraham has a vision, and he's talking to God, and I got these 3 angels, so there you got the Trinity. I mean, it's absurd. Totally absurd. First of all, Abraham stops talking to God. And we learn out that talking to God, serving guests and having guests is more important than talking to God. So he stopped talking to God. Yeah, but now you want to tell me based on that, since he had a vision, well, you're going to have to jump through hoops here. Since he had this vision, he's talking to God, very good. And these angels are disguised as Arabs, very good. So God and the angels all together, Trinity. That make a lot of sense? Yeah, and show other proofs. Okay, it's ludicrous, but if you want to, drink the Kool-Aid, to drink the Kool-Aid. Because that's based on what you're going to believe. And if that's a whole bunch of garbage, which it is, then you're in trouble. Because then they just knocked everything out. But again, a person can be mistaken. A person, can want to really believe in the right thing. Could they be totally mistaken? Sure. Could they be brainwashed? 100%. 100%. But my question is, why do you have to jump through hoops? Why didn't you just tell me directly? This is talking about JC. Why did the prophet say directly? This is what it's talking about. This is what the future was talking about. Very good. Yeah. And the commentators say, it's talking about King David. It's talking about this one. It's talking about the future Messiah. Very good. Okay. So you say they'll say the same thing. But the idea of the Messiah is very hidden. In general, it's very hidden. Nobody knows what's going to be. There are contradictions all over the place in Tanakh. It's exactly why the Rambam said you should never try and figure out when the Messiah is going to come, because if you do, and you make a whole calculation according to the verses, and it doesn't happen, you become a heretic, you'll say Torah is not true, and that's it. Right? But it's totally, in hiding over here. Very, very hard to fathom. Very, very hard to fathom. Okay. But why are the verses, whatever, in Isaiah and other places, why do they not say explicitly? So you can say, well, same thing, right? Maybe that's what they'll answer. It's a whole hidden thing, and it's not supposed to be that, that out there. People aren't supposed to know, but it's a hidden thing, and same thing. I don't know if you can say that. I don't think it's a good argument, right? But again, if you want to tell me clear that's what it means, tell me. But to say God spoke to him, God spoke to myself, and he said this, that, and the other. Okay, right? Show me in our sources. I don't care about your sources. Show in our sources. Show in Isaiah. Show in Daniel. Show in, wherever. Show it. Don't give me Webster's 8th definition. Show me explicitly. So this just goes to prove. In any of these other religions, the same thing, right? You have to have a tremendous leap of faith. And when you have a tremendous leap of faith, what happens? Yeah, you gotta, you gotta believe something. You gotta believe something. So we believe with knowledge. We have a lot of concrete knowledge. It's not a leap of faith. By them, it has to be a leap of faith. Okay. But again, if a person wants to make a mistake, they have free choice? Absolutely have free choice. Right? They absolutely have free choice. Are they being brainwashed by their own people? Sure. Right? But that's their choice. Everyone makes that choice. So it's not like, as far as we understand, it's not like our free choice is taken away. But Rebbe says you got to worry. Maybe it is. Maybe the fact that we do a lot of the same things all the time, and we don't stop, and our evil inclination overcomes us, maybe this is what it shows. Maybe it shows beyond the shadow of a doubt, we're stuck, and there's no way out. But let's say that would be the case. Let's say that God made it so hard because of our sins or whatever, that we got stuck. And we keep doing the same thing over and over again. Is it possible to change? Is it possible to change? So if a person really desires to change, then God will help them. If not, they're in an abyss. They're going to be stuck. Their soul is going to be absolutely crushed. Now, again, it doesn't mean it doesn't come out. It could possibly come out. Yeah. But the more a person keeps doing the same things over and over and over again, once a person does something, it becomes part of you. Once it becomes part of you, it's very hard to change. See, I'm making it very easy. I'm not saying you're born this way, right? If you're born this way, and you have certain DNA from your parents, so that's harder in a certain way. Why? Because this is something, you didn't have a choice in. Right? The Mishna Pirkei Avos says, you're born against you or you die against you. Right? Koppelman would say in parentheses, you still have to live. Okay. But even if that's true, and we're not given a choice who our parents are, we're not given a choice who our siblings are, we're not given a choice socioeconomic situation, we're not given a choice any of these things. Okay. So even if we're not given a choice, yeah, these things are part of us. Now, does God want us to act on it? No. Person gets upstairs after 120 years after they die. They can easily ask the question. Yeah, you can't punish me for this or punish me for that because you made me that way. Now, let's say God says, you're right. I put these character traits in you. I wanted you to overcome them. I wanted you to go against them. I didn't tell you to do that. I didn't tell you to give in to them. But you decided that's what you wanted to do. Okay. So God can easily say, you can't blame me. This is not on me. Yeah? I gave you the ability to overcome them. I didn't tell you to do them. But I have more of an affinity to do it. I have more of an inclination to do it. Okay. But who says you should have? So that's one thing. What if you did it to yourself? This is worse. So let's say you did things to yourself you shouldn't have done. Yeah, you saw things, you watched them, whatever. You heard things, and now they're also part of you, right? So you can't make the claim. I didn't have intention for this. You did it against my will. No. What's God gonna say, right? Put on my funny George Burns glasses, my funny mustache. What would I say? What would I say? I would tell you, I didn't tell you to do this. I didn't stop you, but I didn't tell you to do it. Since I didn't tell you to do it and you did it, guess what? You make the bed you lie in. It's your fault. It's 100% your fault. You can't blame me for that. Right? It's what the Ramban, I think, says in the book of Job. Right? When Job's friends come to comfort him, some of them say, yeah, well, it's not really your fault, but it's the way the stars are set up, this, that. So the Ramban there says, I think it's the Ramban who says, a person's going to complain, and a person's going to say that, God, you did this to me. Yeah, you did this to me, not me. You're the one who caused it. Right? So God can say, okay, let's play back. Let's play back the video. You play back the video, God says, look what you did over here. Look what you did over here. Because of what you did, I didn't have to stop you. Let me show you places where I did stop you. That really you could have got hurt in other ways. I stopped you. Okay. In this case, I didn't stop you. For whatever reason. Maybe didn't have any extra lives, whatever it is. God didn't stop him. Okay. So he has to go through it. Very good. But God says, didn't you listen to Coppin's classes? 614th commandment, don't be stupid. The 615th commandment, don't be a moron. I didn't tell you to do this, but I didn't stop you. You wanted to do this, that, and the other thing? Okay. Some things I did stop you, other things I didn't. But if you did it on your own, even if the evil inclination's egging you on, doesn't matter. You did it with your right mind. You did it. You made that decision. Okay. God says, I have to get involved. Now, some things, God will say, I did get involved. Okay. And if he didn't get involved, whose fault is it? It's your own fault. You have no one else to blame except yourself. It's your own fault. Nobody wants to hear that, right? But that's the truth. Not everything is built inside of us that we did it, that whatever we did is because of our own DNA, from our parents, for better or for worse. That's our DNA. Okay. What about other things we put into our DNA now that we did to ourselves? What excuse is a person going to make? They can't say they didn't did it. They didn't do it. Can't say that. There are many things you can't say over here. Based on that, God can say, I didn't tell you to do it. Right? I didn't want you to act on this. I didn't want you to do this, but you did it to yourself. That's worse. Because if you say, you made me this way, okay, but who said you had to act on it? And we have all kinds of things that, we're wired a certain way. Some people have, greater anger issues. Some people have greater issues. They don't want to help others. They have miserly issues. They have, eating issues. They can have any number of things that program that way. Okay. But even if they're programmed that way, doesn't God want us to work on it? You're right. Even the Ramban says, chapter 19, book of Leviticus, verse 2, says, you should be holy because God is holy. Says the Ramban over there, you got a right to eat, you got a right to drink. No problem. Who said you're supposed to be a glutton? Who said you're supposed to be 50 pounds overweight? Who said you're supposed to be an alcoholic? But you gave me this opportunity. You gave me more of the ability to like food than other people. Okay, so what? So that's something you got to work on. That is something you're going to have to fight against. Yeah. And there are people that, let's say, one or both the parents, let's say, are obese, and they eat up a storm. Their kids also. It goes into the genes. Very good. But who says they should do that? Say it's part of me. I like to eat when I'm not hungry. I won't exercise. Okay, so you're like an Oompa Loompa, right? Wizard of Oz, yeah? So, so you'll go with these fat kids. Okay. Does God want that? Certainly not. That's not what he wants. They don't want you to work on it because you made me that way. So what? Again, it's catch-22, right? Just goes around in circles. We have no excuse. So what if God made you that way? We have all kinds of things we need to work on. Some have, greater biases in certain things than others. Okay. That's true. Right? So certain things for them may be harder than others. And others have certain things harder than you have it. So it doesn't matter. They still have to work on it. Right? It says the Ramchal in Derech Hashem, in the way of God. Mentions the path of the just also. What are we doing here in this world? We're here to toil. We're here to work. That's what we're doing here. Now, it's going to be easy. It's not going to be easy, but when someone asks, why would God do that? Why would he put us in this world? Right? Why not just leave us in the spiritual world? So the Ramchal states clear. What are we doing here? We're here to fix up whatever bad character traits we are and to reach a minimal level to have a portion of the world to come. But we're here to struggle. If you don't come to this world to struggle, right, then what are you going to have in the next world? You have nothing in the next world. You have to be part of this world. The soul has to come into this world. Right? It could come back, a number of times, okay, but it has to be in this world. And if it's not in this world, why, how's it going to get a portion of the world to come? That's our base, right? These are the basics, right? The soul has to come into this world. Very good. But does that have to be so hard? Does that have to be so challenging? Again, some will have it easier, some will have it harder. It doesn't matter. But what's the point? The point is I have to serve God, right? As a Jew or a non-Jew, doesn't matter. I have to serve God. I have to do to the best of my ability. Very good. Since I have to do the best of my ability, does it mean it's always going to be easy? No. Does it mean I'm always going to be successful? No. Right? But these things are to make us who we are. Right? They're challenges. There are challenges. We say every day in the morning, don't bring me to challenges. But it's a catch-22. If you don't have challenges, you don't grow. Right? So you can't have it both ways. Then you tell me, I see people, don't keep Torah mitzvahs, don't do anything, they have it easy. Good. So God has to reward them, right? Simple answer is God has to reward them for any good deed they did, right? Imagine an evil people, an evil person. And one day they helped Granny cross the street, right? One day, they gave charity. They did something. Doesn't God have to reward them? In God's world, doesn't he have to reward them? Has to reward them, right? That's how reward and punishment works. But He'll give them their mitzvah in this world, whatever they've done. He'll give them the benefit of that. Very good. And then he'll wipe them out in the next world. They won't have a portion to come in the next world. Now, most people are not that evil. There are some, right? There are some that are going to get punished. They may get severely punished. Yeah, in the next world, never have a portion of the world to come, just get punished, all the time. And there have been tremendously evil people that God has punished the soul forever, right? But most people are not that bad. There are some better, some worse, right? But most people are not that inherently evil. That God is going to wipe out in the next world, right? But there will be some, that for sure. That's for sure. He doesn't want anything to do with them in the spiritual world. So God will give them all their merit in this world. He'll give them all the reward for whatever they've done in this world because he has to reward them, right? That's part of reward and punishment. And then he's going to wipe them out in the next one. Right? So even a person sees like someone who blasphemes, does all kinds of things that God wants, right? We can be reassured that, either going to get punished, in this world or the next world or both. And even the punished in the next world, there's a very good chance it's going to be, potentially nothing left of them, and they won't have a portion of the world to come. So even if they have it easy here, what it looks like it's easy here, they also have all kinds of issues. Could be with family, with their kids, with their spouse, with any number of things. Everybody has it hard, and that's not really the point. The question is what we do with it, right? So if they're going to do whatever they want, don't think they're getting a free ride. They're not getting a free ride. God could build them up just to slaughter them also. See that in professional sports all the time. Someone coming up for a new contract, they're gonna make millions. They do something stupid in the off season, they get caught. That's it, ruins them. Nobody wants to touch them. They're a pariah. It happens. Or what can happen is they get injured. They're up for a big contract, and they get injured. And they get severely injured. Doesn't mean they can't come back, but, they're not going to be making the same amount of money because, now they're damaged goods. Now the question is how they come back, right? Imagine someone has an Achilles injury. Okay. So let's say even they got paid a lot of money. Are they coming back the same? It's going to take them at least a year, right? To rehabilitate and all that. Very good. But again, if someone did something, that could happen. Major injury could happen, and that's why, at least in football, that's why they're going to try and get as much money as possible, because the average time span of a football player is only 3 years, which I was kind of shocked. I was kind of shocked when I saw that stat. But it makes sense because, it's a tough game, even with all the pads. Major injuries, back injuries, head injuries, knee injuries, whatever it may be, and they don't last. They don't last because body's getting pummeled. So what are they trying to do? Get as much money as possible and get it guaranteed. Right? Forget about what, the future, whether they have brain injuries and other things, right? Not even talking about that. But the fact is God can set up a person, and they're like treated like a prima donna their whole lives. They make it to the professionals, very good, right? They want to start to make money, things look good, and everything's going good. And then they get their legs cut off from under them, no pun intended, right? Either injured or something else happens, right? In the off season of football, you always hear cases, people getting shot, people doing other things, right? Ruins reputations. People don't necessarily want to touch them. Some people will anyway, but people don't think. People just act. But this is partially one of the reasons that God can build up someone, and then shoot them down. Then just totally demolish them, and ruin their career. All someone needs to do is make a statement. And if it's let's say it's something racist, it ruined them, right? This story with somebody, I don't know, it was a sportscaster for years. For years. They made a comment that, I think it was a true statement, but, in either case, even if it's a true statement, shouldn't have been said in public, right? Let's say, and that was it. That was it. They fired him on the spot because, you can't make such comments. Even if it was true, it just wasn't politically correct. But it was a true statement. Well, the person said it was a true statement, but sometimes people just don't want to hear the truth because they're like, oh, you're just going against these type of people and this and that. But it's a true statement. It's a true statement either way, right? If that was a true statement, what's the problem? Well, some things, even if it's true, you can't say it. You're not allowed to say it, right? You're not allowed to say it in public for sure. So you tell me, okay, a person in public, they're going to get scrutinized more. Very good, right? It's probably true. They're going to get scrutinized more. Even if they're going to get scrutinized more, so they're going to be more careful. Okay. Even if it's something that's, even if something is true. So God can take someone that's successful in such a case, build them up, they make one slip up, and they're ruined. Sports world, no one's going to touch them. Even years later, no one's going to touch them. So what are they going to do for livelihood? Very good. So if they made enough money, okay. If not, they got to go into something else because their career is now ruined. And it happens. It happens across the board. Right? I'm not saying, sometimes more common, sometimes less common. Right? But a lot of times these things happen in the off season. Yeah. And sometimes, they'll pay a serious price, but no one ever said these people were Rhodes Scholars. Some of them are pretty bright, but obviously, you want to keep what's private private. Make sure you don't get caught, whatever. But the problem is God wants you to get caught and you're gonna lose. You're gonna lose either way. So in that sense, even if people seem to have it easy, they could lose things overnight. Right? A person can have salvation overnight. We always say, Yeshua's Hashem Kerafai, right? Salvation of God can come at the blink of an eyelash, and a person can lose also. Then, totally lose. Life is very fragile. You don't know, King Solomon says, you don't know what today's going to bring. You don't know you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. But again, what's the whole idea over here? The whole idea is, at least at this juncture, is that it doesn't matter. We have to look at things that it doesn't matter what's going on around us. God doesn't care what's going on around us. We have to do what we need to do. Now, isn't it true? Isn't it true society is an influence? Sure. Isn't there plenty of influence in society? Yeah. There's a lot of influence, right? 100%. 100% there's a lot of influence. But even if there's a lot of influence, surrounding us, who says I have to get caught up in that? Right? Who says? Who says I have to get caught up in that? But you'll say it's easy to get caught up in it. Okay. Person can have a claim against God and say, well, I don't understand. Look at all these things that happen. I grew up in communist Russia. So of course I was a communist. God says, I didn't tell you to be a communist. I didn't tell you to get stuck in there. But the whole society was against me. It was very hard to fight against this and that. Okay. God says, but this is what you could have done. That's the second movie a person sees according to Kabbalah, what your potential was. What you absolutely could have done. You didn't do it. Right? You didn't do it over here. I'm going to say, look at the family I grew up in. Look at what society says and what's going on. So anybody listen to whoever's out there, right? Sometimes I think I'm always speaking to myself, right? Whoever's out there knows they've had to fight, against family, against society to get where they are right now. Yeah? They've had to fight against the world. That's the way it is. If you want truth. But guess what? You got somewhere. You actually got to the truth. Now, it didn't come easy. So someone grew up in communist Russia. Isn't it hard for them to see the truth? Sure. Or if you grew up in China, or you grew up in other places, right? We grew up in Scandinavia, a big atheist place there, right? So you grew up in a place like that. Now, isn't it possible to see God even if you grew up in such a place? Possible. Is it going to be hard? Yeah, I think it's going to be hard. Yeah, but again, if you want the truth, God will help you. And it comes at a price. It might come at a price with family, friends, it might come at a price, right? But again, what would someone rather have? Fantasy? Yeah, would rather have fantasy? Most people say, yeah, I'll take fantasy. I don't want to break anything up. I don't want to have any pressure, this and that. Okay. Some people will take fantasy. Very good. So let them take fantasy. But if you want truth, you pay a price. Now, the question is the price worth it? I think most people would say, yeah, the price is worth it. They may say, I wish it was easier. And I wish the path was easier. Yeah. 100%. No one wants to be tossed around the world. No one wants to lose everything. Everyone wants to have it easy, right? Very good. But life's not that way. That's not what life is. Life is about toil. Life is about, dealing with hard situations. Sometimes we do it to ourselves. Okay. Even if it wasn't done to ourselves, it's still hard. But, as we always say, you have to be able to see the bigger picture, right? All right, so let me take some questions here. Someone asks, well, it's not about success or failure, but about pushing against the rock. Yeah, okay. But again, even if it's not that, what's it all about? It's not to break us. That's not what it's about. What it's about is I have to develop a connection to God. Remember, everything we do wrong, minor or major, at least you're taking at least one step backwards. So imagine on a daily basis how many steps backwards we take. But in order to get back to zero, you got to take steps forward. But if I were playing God, I put on my funny George Burns glasses and funny mustache, so I have to understand God has a lot of mercy, right? God sits on the seat of judgment also. God can look down and say, look at my creation, unbelievable. Look how, they're trying to serve me. But like a person gets a C minus, right? Or a D plus. And God can look down. I can look down and say, look, this is how you serve me. I give you food. Most of the world, most of the world as we know it is water. So you always have plenty of water. You have food, and you have plenty of good food to eat. Whether it's healthy or not, it doesn't matter. A person won't be starving in general, right? And this is how you thank me. You make a crummy blessing. You say my name, but your attention is somewhere else. I'm not even talking about Kabbalah. I mean, I come down with 1,000 things that we do wrong. Yeah, and how we pray, and what we should do, and what should we think about, and how we interacted with others. All these different things. Are we really going to pass the test? So they're going to say, well, I can always do better, right? We can always do better. Question is, if we have greater potential, and God says, okay, you're doing something good, at this level, but really you should be at a higher level. Yeah. So really, you're not reaching potential. How many people are going to reach their potential? That's not the question. The question is, am I growing? Am I growing or not? Am I trying to run up a down escalator to try and grow, or am I staying on the escalator and just going straight? Am I striving for mediocrity, which is akin to spiritual death, or am I working hard? Even if I take baby steps, right? Even if I take baby steps, yeah. So, what do we want? What's the greatest success for a person? It's having a name, right? But it's not about that. It's not about necessarily what people are going to say about you either. It's your connection, 100%. We don't need intermediaries. It's your connection between you and God. And what did I do to serve Him? How did I serve Him? Now, some days are better than others. Some days we're tired. Some days we feel we're getting beaten down in life. Some days we feel that, you just don't want to get out of bed, and other things, because other things are hanging over our head. Okay, that's all, this is all part of life. Right? I'm not telling anyone, I don't think anything that, they don't know. The question is, though, what are my goals? What should I be doing over here? Right? If you don't feed the body will die. If you don't feed the soul properly, the soul will die. The soul is insatiable. I need to feed it with Torah and mitzvahs. Right? So really, at every stage, whatever we're doing, I should be thinking in Torah. I should be doing mitzvahs. I should try to do acts of loving kindness. Try to help others. Right? Try to learn as much as possible. Not get distracted. But isn't this world one big distraction? Now all you need is the one distraction in the palm of your hand. The whole big distraction, right? So it's hard. But every generation had the distraction. At the time of the Industrial Revolution, what was the distraction? You had socialism, you had communism, you had social Darwinism, really, right? Survival of the fittest. I'm going to squash you in order to survive. I take all these mom and pop shops, it comes on Kmart, Walmart, whatever, rid them all out of business, right? Survival of the fittest, very good, right? So you think, well, we have that also now. Okay, I'm talking about, the Industrial Revolution and what goes on. Very good. So even with all that, isn't it easy to take yourself away from God? 100%. 100%. It's easy to get distracted. Yes. Is that what God wants? No. But he's going to say, okay, I created this world. You created all the distractions. You're going to say, but you gave us the ability to do that. Okay. I gave you the ability to do it. Who says I told you you should get stuck in it. But I didn't expect me not to be stuck in it. I don't live in a cave. I'm not supposed to live in a cave. I'm supposed to live with others. Right? It's one of the 24 things the Rambam says in the laws of repentance. Right? One of the 24 things that stops the person from properly repenting. What is one of them? Separating yourself from the community. You have to be part of a community. Right? Just contact someone in whatever, far part of the world. I told them, you want to convert, you got to move. Like, how am I supposed to do that? I'm like, you got to work on it. You got to get out of the place where you are at some point. And you got to live amongst Jews. And if it's impossible to do that, okay, so you're staying on Jew. So you're staying on, right? I keep you busy for the next 250 years if I'd live that long. That's what you have to do. People giving me flack and saying, well, it doesn't say anywhere in the Talmud. It doesn't say anywhere in the Torah or the prophets or the writings. It doesn't say anywhere. I got to live amongst Jews. Very good. How do you expect to be Jewish if you can't, if you don't live amongst Jews? By osmosis? Not going to happen. Not going to happen. Even with the internet, even with all you could learn. Even if you're learning all these great classes, whatever. You got to live with others. You got to participate, in the good things, God forbid the bad things. You have to be part of a community. That's the way it works. What does that have to tell me that? That's pretty obvious. Or if you can't move, okay. So you can't move. Some people can't move, right? Some people, what they say, move close to an Orthodox synagogue, the price go up exponentially. True. Right? It's true. Okay. Now, if someone wants to do it, I'll give them a way to do it. But again, a person has to have a pure heart over here, but you can't just do what you want. This is not what we call a hefker welt. It's not an ownerless world over here. I got to, there are things I have to do, even if it's hard. These are things you have to do. There are certain, there's certain criteria. Again, if Christianity be true, be easy. You pour a little bit of water, believe in JC, and that's it. Be beautiful. I'd be singing his praises all the time. I'd be trying to convert the mass. It's such an easy thing. It's called pass the buck, right? Pass the buck. That's what it is. You take no responsibility for your actions, which go, say, oh, Christianity is built on Judaism. Hell no. It's their own thing. Where do you see taking responsibility in Christianity? Any place. You don't have to. It's all about what I do. The Torah makes very clear. You do this, very good. If you don't do this, there's going to be payback. Death penalty for some things, spiritually cut off for other things. It could be a negative prohibition. You get lashes, whatever it is. There's payback. Where do you see it's on payback? Again, I believe in it 100%. I'd be a card-carrying member. I'd try and convert the world. It's the easiest thing. The easiest thing. My thoughts don't matter. My actions don't matter. Say a few Hail Marys, pay the priest off a little bit. Beautiful. It's a beautiful life. Beautiful life. There's only one problem. It has no meaning. Because what I do doesn't matter. All my actions don't matter. Okay, still got the law of the land, but essentially my actions don't matter. My actions don't matter. What's the point? Because someone came to atone for my sins, so what are you living for? What in the world are you living for? Makes no sense. At all. Someone asks, okay. Now I spoke about a donkey, right? Very good. Could a donkey mean a car? Or something like that. In theory. But who says we're taking it? Who says we're taking it literally? Right? Many of the commentators, especially, speaking more in esoteric terms, I'd say more according to Kabbalah and other things. We're talking about a whole different realm of what it means. Whole different realm. Right? But a lot of things in Tanakh, that's why I need someone, someone proper to teach it. It's very hard to learn on your own because of, what's going on behind the scenes. But there are times things are said, many times. Things are said, they're not meant to be taken literally. Now, some are, okay. But there are many things that are 100% a metaphor. Right? I'll give one example. One potential example. There's a commentary on Tehillim that, my Rebbe was once telling me that when the Messiah comes, Jewish people are not going to be in Israel. All the Jews we're going to be thrown out of the land. God forbid, we're going to be in the desert. The Messiah is going to bring them in. So Mary had this big smile. I'm like, what are you smiling at? You're also going to be in the desert. I said, the Messiah's going to have to bring you in also. Yeah. Now again, what does that mean? Does that mean literally? That we're totally going to be thrown out? Does it mean spiritually? Right? Right? So it could be, you had some, great people in the Knesset that wanted to give, a good chunk of the land to the Arabs, which would be totally indefensible. Right? Right? And they would throw us out. That could happen. That in theory could, I find it hard to believe now, but, back in the day when, Arafat, Yamach Shemo B'Zichro, may his name be blotted out, may rot wherever he is. They're offering 95% of the West Bank. If you look what, quote unquote, the West Bank looks like, it's the heart of the country. That's where one of the reasons they took it over. They kept getting attacked, from all sides. Right? So eventually took it over, settled it. You give that away, it's like indefensible. So what's going to happen? Either be slaughtered or thrown out or both. Now, could that in theory happen? I find it hard to believe the way the political landscape is now. But in theory, you're only talking less than 20 years ago. That was the goal. And Olmert was going to give 90% back or 80% back. Yeah, Barack, same thing, if not more. So the left would be willing to do that because I think it's going to bring peace. Again, I think the landscape has changed a little bit. So I don't know if they would exactly say the same thing, but could that happen? In theory. But again, any of these things that are much more complex. You got someone standing on one foot, doesn't know nothing from nothing, says, oh, that's what it means. Do me a favor. Like, when I was in camp back in the day, someone said something stupid. You wouldn't say they said something stupid. All you would say was learn the rules, play the game, practice. Right? If you want to say they said something stupid, that was a better way of saying it. Yeah? But you got people talk out of their elbow, say all kinds of things, make no sense. Make no sense based because they don't have knowledge. They don't have knowledge. So you have to know when to take things literally. We're not to take things literally. Again, all this stuff is clouded in mystery. In mystery. But I didn't see anybody, I was looking around, I didn't see anybody who said, that's a literal thing. It's what it represents. It's what the idea represents. Right? Not that he's going to, literally come. Now, could it be that it's a literal thing? Even, you take out the donkey and you put it in our terminology, some type of car or plane or who knows what? Maybe. Right? Maybe. But again, if the prophet uses, certain language, he's talking about a certain animal. Why is he bringing something in about a certain animal? Why this animal? Why a donkey in general? What does a donkey bring to the table? You think, it's very simple to say, well, it's talking about terminology back in their day. They didn't have cars, they didn't have planes. You're right. That's true. That's true. But he used the donkey for a reason. He didn't just throw it out there for no reason. He used it for a reason. Right? So the question is, that's not the point here. Right? But, what did he use it for? What's the reason he used it for? Yeah. Just to throw it out there? No, there are different things going on with the donkey. Right? And what it represents and what it brings to the table. Someone asked, how do we pray? Thank God for the challenges for the ones that harmed us or even manipulate us. Good question. So I was saying the Shemona Esrei. When you say the Shemona Esrei, silent meditation, whatever you want to call it, there's a prayer called Shema Kolenu. Right, one of the last prayers before you get to the what do you call it, the temple service that we say. In Shema Kolenu, I can ask for whatever I want. That's the general prayer I can ask for whatever I want. Or in the last paragraph before you take your 3 steps back, right? In that paragraph, you can pray for all you need, right? Each paragraph has its own thing. Let's say, the paragraph of Tain Bracha, when we say, or in the summer, or Tain Tal Bracha, we say in the winter for rain, right? Also means sustenance, right? And so in that paragraph, what do we pray for? Livelihood. When we're talking about Rifa'enu, prayer, health, right? We pray for health for other people, maybe other people are sick. Each blessing is a certain thing to concentrate on. On that blessing, I can ask for whatever I want, right? And there, I would say, you should say a lot, you thank God for everything you have, right? Every last thing, right? But you can ask for all your needs, right? You can, and you can thank him even if it's hard. You can thank him even if you caused this, even if you did things wrong, and you want God to help you overcome it, right? That's a good place to put it there, right? That's a good place, right? And, even anyone who's harmed us or taken advantage of us, right? You could say it there as well, or you could say in the paragraph of forgiveness that you forgive them, whatever, Each paragraph has its thing that you can have in mind. That's the general place for all, for being thankful for everything, even right, even for hard challenges, because you could say, well, thank God for the hard challenge, even though you did it to yourself. Right? So obviously you gotta apologize, you did it to yourself, whatever, take me out of this, whatever, but that's the paragraph to do it. Doggy can't care for babies. That I don't know. I'm not up to date what donkeys do or don't do, but I mean they are very strong animals. I mean what I don't know if that's I don't know if that's the case or not. I'll just mention one thing on that. One second. So if you look at Zechariah, what does he say? He says that Mashiach's going to be a pauper riding on a donkey. Yeah, pauper meaning poor. So what does that mean? So the Medrash says that the scribes is greater than Abraham, higher than Moses, loftier than any angels, right? Supernal angels. On Isaiah 52:13, there's I don't know, I guess it's a it's a medrash measure there. It can represent also the messianic process. Begins at the beginning of time, right? Meaning God created the heavens and the earth. The universe is still empty and unformed, right? In darkness, Spirit of God hovered above the emerging existence. Says the Medrash, what's the Spirit of God? It means Spirit of the Messiah. So what does that mean? Divine Spirit of creation, right? That is going to be used for God's purpose in creating and all that. Now, we have a number of things by the Messiah's donkey, right? We have Abraham, right, bind of Isaac. You have Abraham rose in the morning, rode his donkey, right, got his donkey ready, got the supplies and all that to kill his son. Then you have Moses dispatched on a mission by God, take him out of Egypt. And Moses took his wife and children, set them upon a donkey. Right? So you have Abraham, Moses, and the Messiah itself using a donkey. Now again, what does God want? He wants us to refine and elevate material existence, which distort our true priorities, that's for sure. Now, interesting enough, what's the Hebrew word for donkey? The word for donkey is chamor, right? What does chamor mean? Material, right? Chomer means material things. So the donkey is material beast, harnessed, physical, directed to higher and loftier ends, which we've spoken about many times, using the physical to sanctify it. Forever, these are different, ideas. Get into Hasidus and other things. It's you're looking at deeper things. So let's just say for argument's sake, let's say what is a chamor? What is a document? Sorry, what is a donkey? What does a donkey represent? In general, chomer. What does chomer mean? The physical world. Now, Judaism believes I can take the physical world and I can sanctify it, right? Against Christians, obviously. I can take an apple, make a braypria eitz, that grows from a tree, right? I can mention God's name and sanctify the food. I can sanctify the food and eat it. You're telling me I'm fulfilling an obligation to make a blessing before I eat if you're a Jew. Very good. So what's the purpose of making the blessing? Right? You can't, a Jew has to make a blessing before they eat, otherwise they're called the thief. They'd be considered like a thief because you're getting benefit from the physical world without thanking God. Very good. Right? Very good. But what would I say? What would I say? I'm satisfying my hunger. Right? I want a peach, pear, plum, whatever. I want to satisfy my hunger. Beautiful. But even though I'm satisfying my hunger, I bring godliness to the world. How do I bring godliness to the world? I make a blessing. I mention his name. I say he's king of the world. Again, non-Jews don't have to do that. Right? Certainly they're not going to convert. They certainly don't have to do that. Right? We have an obligation. That's going to bring godliness in the world. But I can take the physical, and that's really the point here. I can take the physical and sanctify it. Right now, the Ramchal says in Derech Hashem, he says, person makes that blessing, it goes upstairs, God looks at it, judges it, throws it back in this world, judges it physically and spiritually, however that works. But again, I'm taking something, I'm bringing godliness into the world. I'm sanctifying the physical. You don't have that by the Christians, right? Everything's bad, right? Physicality is bad. Well, why is this bad? I made a blessing on it, I sanctified it, I'm hungry. Okay. So I'm allowed to eat. Again, I'm not allowed to eat like a pig, but I'm allowed to eat. Very good. If I'm allowed to eat, this is satisfying my hunger, even if it's not healthy for me. What do? I make a blessing, sanctify it. That's a huge thing. I'm sanctifying the physical. Not easy to sanctify the physical. That's what we do, right? That's what we do. So the mule and the donkey different. They're different. For sure, they're different, right? I mentioned many times before, mule is sterile. Donkey's not sterile, right? But again, different animals represent different, different things. I'm just giving one idea, right? One idea, the fact that a chamor comes from the root of the word of Homer, of the physical world. Right? You can say, well, a mule also does, right? A mule also comes from the physical world. Very good, right? But each name of whatever animal represents a certain thing, right? It represents a certain thing. Yeah, this represents physicality. So it represents physicality. Okay, we live in the physical world. But I got to take the physical world and sanctify it. That's what I have to do. That's my obligation. Now, is that an easy thing to do? I don't think it's an easy thing to do, right? But that we do it all the time, right? Shabbos, you have 3 meals, right? You make the blessing over wine. A grape juice. You have challah. You have, you have bread. You have you have a nice meal. You eat nicer than you would during the week, right? That's true, but you're taking the physical and sanctifying it, right? We also dress a certain way, right? We dress nicer than we normally would. So I'm taking the physical and I'm exemplifying it more. That's what we do. That's what we do. Yeah, let me see other questions. What about a thing called karma? Yeah, what about it? Yeah, we believe beyond beyond the shadow of a doubt. We definitely believe that no such thing as deja vu. These type of things. Yeah, because the soul's never going to recognize in this world. Right? We have free choice. Even if you tell me God knows what's going to happen anyway, okay. Yeah, well, not a Jewish concept by any stretch. Is what I would say, because karma is it's a totally different thing, right? It's we're looking at it in a totally different way. Even the fact that God's in control and He runs the world and all that, very good. I still have to act. I still have to do things, right? Since I still have to do things, what does it mean? What does it mean over here? It means that my soul's never going to recognize anything in this world. Even, brothers will say, even under deep digression, whatever it's called, that soul could recount if it's in deep hypnosis, that it recall whatever it's doing, whatever it did in previous lives. Okay. According to what I understand, according to Kabbalah, it shouldn't be able to do that. So I don't have an answer for that. It could be, this might be a bad answer, but it could be that soul itself, when a person's awake, it'll never remember what it's doing here. Maybe, under tremendous hypnosis, maybe that wouldn't be the case. That they could recall, the soul could recall it, right? But karma not a Jewish concept. I would say, in general. Yeah, let me see other questions here. All right, I'm gonna stop here. I do this every Saturday, 2:30 Eastern time, 9:30 Israel time. Anyone has any questions, find me on Facebook at Machaim Kaufman, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism, orthodoxconversion.com, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism on YouTube. There I got videos on Q&As, Ethics for Our Fathers, Book of Leviticus. You want to send me an email, rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com, RBBICHAIMCOFFMAN